Pro-democracy protesters in Eswatini are planning to intensify their actions. That's despite the army being deployed onto the streets to quell protests, which have turned violent in the past weeks. At least 40 people are reported to have died in these violent clashes, with police accused of using excessive force. Well, to get the latest now, let's speak to Zweli Dlamini, who is the editor of Swaziland News in Eswatini. Zweli, good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday View. First up, what is the latest you can tell our viewers here on ENCA? Have the protests stopped? And the army and the police, are they still deployed? We understand there have been efforts by the regional body SADC to promote dialogue in order to resolve the political clashes in Swaziland, Eswatini.
Thank you for having me. What is actually happening now in Eswatini? The army is moving around the homes, beating people, instilling fear among the citizens. So the citizens have suggested, some have suggested that they want to ban homes belonging to members of the security forces, particularly the army and the police. So even though SADC arrived yesterday to facilitate a dialogue, we are seeing the killing and the beating and the harassment of the people intensifying, particularly in the rural areas. So we are still monitoring the situation, even though in the last 2 days there was seemingly some stability, but it seems it must start over and over again. We don't know what at the end of the day today will happen.
As we speak, things are calm, but the situation remains tense. That's what I'm reading from what you are saying. What about the efforts of SADC to promote dialogue to end the current political violence that we've seen in Eswatini?
SADC yesterday arrived to facilitate the dialogue, but what happened is that seemingly there was an element of dishonesty on the government side, because some members of the civil society, key players in this pro-democracy protest, were not invited on the round table. The government invited individuals who, despite that they are part of the civil society, these people are linked to the king. Some are relatives of the king. They were not active in facilitating this pro-democracy protest. So the government actually picked individuals who are somehow pro the current system of the king, and they paraded them as members of the civil society. Yes, it's true, some are members of the church bodies, the Swaziland, the Conference of Churches, but the truth of the matter is that they were not, or they are not actively involved in the demands for democratic reforms. So for the government to then parade them as leaders of the civil society, that was just misleading.
So at this stage, how do you, from your reports on the ground, I mean, from as a journalist, how can people outside Eswatini like us manage to get a grip on what will be next? I mean, you said earlier, today you are anticipating from the reports on the ground an escalation or resumption of those protests as the police and the army continue to try and, as you said, they are continuing the intimidation of those who are involved, and SADC's efforts are not inclusive enough.
Yes, what might happen now, we might see a resumption of the violent clashes between members of the security forces and the civilians, because you will recall that some few days ago, about 5 days ago, the citizens were burning properties belonging to companies linked to the king. It was a terrible situation. It was somehow chaotic, but later the situation destabilized, but at the same time people were being shot silently. I cannot confidently say it stabilized because the government has shut down the internet. We are still verifying how the damage that happened after the government shut down the internet. So now, today, before the end of the day today, we will see what will happen, because seemingly the people are angry that while the government had shut down the internet, they were being killed, their relatives were killed, some were shot, been injured, some have been arrested. Some are even missing. So the situation, even though it might seem in the eyes of the international community to be stabilizing, it's somehow a ticking time bomb.
Okay, very quickly and finally, what about you and the media? Are you able to operate freely, Eswatini, and cover these stories freely, or have you also come under pressure?
The truth of the matter is that as I'm speaking to you now, I'm outside Eswatini, because the government is not tolerant to an independent media that is holding those in power accountable. A free media in Swaziland has suffered for too long, whereby we've seen it's not only me. There are many journalists who were arrested. Some were shot even in the midst of this current chaos. Some were shot with rubber bullets in their line of duty. Seemingly the government does not respect the role of the media, the independence of the media.
Yeah, are the journalists who've been arrested, from what you know, and are you able to share that with us? How many journalists, or your colleagues in Eswatini, who might have remained there, who might have been arrested, injured?
No, I'm saying so far, no journalists in this case have been arrested. I'm saying previously, journalists have been arrested for reporting independently. But currently, a journalist from the state-owned Swazi Observer was shot with a rubber bullet, who reported that story. And there is another one from another independently owned media by the name of the Independent News. He was also assaulted by the police. But some of these reports are not coming out clearly, because in Eswatini, the organizations that are supposed to be vocal in terms of media freedom. We have organizations like the Eswatini Editors Forum, we have the Swaziland National Association of Journalists. Those organizations are now captured, such that even if a journalist could be persecuted or injured in their line of duty, they don't highlight those stories vocally in the eyes of the
it's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult currently, as you say, because there's a clampdown on the free flow of information, including the internet that's been shut down. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to leave it there for now. And wherever you are outside Eswatini, keep safe. And we'll keep on tracking that story for you, because civil society groups now in Eswatini say they have a little faith that a SADC intervention will help the situation there. The Swaziland Solidarity Networks, like Lukele says, they'd hoped for more.